You smell it before you see it. Incense, sweat, something older underneath. Something that has soaked into these stones for centuries. You are standing on the Via Sacra, the sacred way, Rome's most celebrated street. The crowd is 10 deep on either side of you, pressed against buildings, hanging from windows. Children lifted onto shoulders, old men craning their necks. Everyone is pushing forward for a better view. The noise is physical. It hits your chest like a fist. Trumpets, drums, the roar of 100,000 people who have been waiting since dawn. Then the procession rounds the corner, and the crowd surges forward, and you see what they came for. Not the gold carts, not the painted models of burning cities, not the exotic animals in chains. You see her, a woman, walking. She is covered in jewelry, bracelets stacked to her elbows, necklaces layered across her chest, gems catching the Roman sun. She should look powerful. She was designed to look powerful. But around her wrists and neck hang chains, not iron chains, gold ones. So thick and heavy that 2 soldiers walk beside her just to hold part of the weight so she does not collapse onto the stones. Every step is agony. You can see it in her jaw, in the way her shoulders shake with the effort of simply remaining upright. She was a queen. Yesterday, she ruled from Egypt to Anatolia. Today, she is the highlight of Rome's greatest show. And here is what nobody tells you about this moment. The chains are not punishment. The gold is not honor. This is something far more calculated than either. This is engineering. You think you know Rome. White marble, Stoic philosophy, senators debating justice in sunlit forums, roads stretching across continents, aqueducts carry clean water to 1 million people, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the eternal city. That Rome is real. And it is also a mask. Underneath it lives something else entirely, a system so precisely designed to crush human dignity that its own historians flinched, writing it down. A machine that did not just defeat its enemies on battlefields. It processed them, paraded them, performed their destruction for paying crowds. And when the show ended, it disposed of them in a hole beneath the earth, while the city above ate and drank and celebrated. This is that story. Not the Rome they teach in schools, the Rome that existed underneath the marble, the Rome that turned conquered queens into living billboards, that engineered public whippings as imperial policy, that built an underground execution chamber directly beneath its holiest temples so that the screaming could not reach the prayers. 3 rulers, 3 fates, 1 machine. And by the time this is over, you will never look at the word civilization the same way again. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now telling me what city and country you are watching from, because this story touched every corner of the world that Rome ever reached. And I want to know where you are standing as you hear it. First, you need to understand the legal architecture that made all of this possible. Because Rome did not do these things in spite of its sophisticated legal system, it did them because of it. The phrase was ius gentium, the law of nations, written into the oldest Roman legal codes, the 12 tables. Centuries of precedent and procedure. It sounds measured. It sounds like something designed to protect people. Read it carefully, and you will find the trap. Ius gentium drew a circle. Inside that circle stood Roman citizens. They had protections. A citizen could not be publicly flogged without formal legal proceedings, could not be executed without a proper sentence, had rights that courts were obligated to recognize. Outside that circle stood everyone else. Defeated foreigners were not persons under Roman law. They were property. Captured in battle, they belonged to the state, or to whoever held them. They could be sold, traded, used, displayed, discarded. No court would hear their case. No judge cared about their story. The law had already been decided. You lost. That is sufficient. A Roman citizen standing before a magistrate was a human being the system was designed to protect. A captured queen standing before a Roman general was an entry in a logistics ledger, ranked alongside shields, horses, grain, and silver. The only question anyone asked was not what is just. The only question was how useful this person is at breathing. This distinction was not an accident. It was the foundation on which everything else was built. Every triumph, every chain, every execution in the dark, all of it was legal. All of it was procedure. All of it operated exactly as the system intended. Rome did not abandon its values when it did these things. These things were its values. Applied to the people, the law had already decided did not fully count. Now, understand the triumph. Because without understanding what it actually was, you cannot understand what it did to the people inside it. The triumph was Rome's highest military honor. Not every general received one. The requirements were specific and demanding. A decisive victory, massive enemy casualties, new territory formally absorbed into the empire. Then the Senate voted. If approved, the city had weeks to prepare. The route ran for miles, from the Field of Mars, through the packed city streets, through the Forum, up toward the Capitoline Hill. Merchants shut their shops. Families abandoned their homes. People flooded in from the countryside. Everyone wanted to witness it. At the front came noise designed to excite. Trumpets, drums, performers working the crowd. Behind them rolled the carts of plunder, gold, silver, captured weapons, statues ripped from foreign temples, painted models of destroyed cities, so Romans, who would never leave Italy, could see what their legions had erased on their behalf. Exotic animals from conquered territories are straining against chains. Every element delivered the same message. We took all of this, and nothing could stop us. Then came the humans. This is the part of the procession where you did not want to be. Captured kings, queens, princes, generals, their children. Some were dressed in rags deliberately. Others were kept in their royal clothing deliberately. Rome wanted both images. It wanted the crowd to see a crown and chains occupying the same body at the same moment. The higher your former status, the greater your entertainment value. Soldiers marched in polished armor flanking the route. The defeated stumbled forward, wrists bound, ankles shackled, surrounded by the noise of a city celebrating their ruin. The route was kept slow deliberately. Every district of Rome deserved its view. The march lasted hours. Roman historian Tacitus recorded these processions without apology. Roman officials never described them as excessive. They described them as effective, because that is precisely what they were. The triumph was not a celebration with humiliation as a side effect. The humiliation was the point. It was a live transmission sent to every allied king, every foreign ambassador, every governor on the edge of the empire. This is what happens to those who forget their place. You will not disappear quietly. You will be displayed. And when the display is finished, something worse will happen out of sight. Zenobia of Palmyra was not a minor queen playing at politics. She ruled a city that controlled the trade arteries connecting Rome to the Persian world. When Rome's 3rd century crisis hit, when emperors rose and fell within months, when the empire hemorrhaged from every border simultaneously, Zenobia moved, fast, decisively. With the instincts of someone who had studied Rome's weakness, the way a surgeon studies anatomy, she pushed Palmyra's territory into Egypt, across Syria, She minted coins, stamped with her own face on land that Rome considered its own. She ruled provinces that had been Roman for generations, and she ruled them as an equal power, not a client, not a dependent, an equal. Rome noticed. Emperor Aurelian was not a philosopher. He was a professional eliminator of problems. He had rebuilt Roman military authority through sheer grinding force after years of crisis. When he turned his attention to Palmyra, he did not open negotiations. He sent legions. Campaign after campaign compressed Zenobia's territory. City after city was dragged back under Roman control. Near the Euphrates, as Zenobia rode east toward Persia and potential safety, Roman cavalry caught her. No dramatic final stand, no honorable duel between equals. She was pulled from her horse and placed in Roman custody alive. And in that single moment, everything she had built, everything she had commanded, every coin bearing her face, every province that had answered to her name, ceased to belong to her. She was now an asset. Aurelian understood exactly what he held. This was the woman who had humiliated Rome's eastern pretensions for years, who had marched armies into Egypt, who had dared to act like a peer. Killing her quietly would destroy an enormous propaganda weapon. Keeping her breathing and displaying her publicly would send a message that no letter or decree could match. He kept her breathing. For 2 years, she waited. 2 years of captivity while Aurelian stabilized the empire, secured the borders, and crushed the remaining fragments of Palmyrene resistance. 2 years of knowing what was coming without knowing precisely when. Then Rome was ready. The triumph of 274 CE. Ancient sources describe in careful detail what Zenobia wore that morning. Not rags, not simple prisoner's clothing. An overwhelming display of jewelry, bracelets stacked along both arms, necklaces layered across her chest, gems covering her dress. Then, over all of it, the gold chains, thick bands locked around her wrists and neck, so massive that attendants had to walk beside her, supporting her partial weight to prevent her from collapsing onto the stones before the procession reached its end. Rome chose gold over iron with complete deliberation. This was the technical precision of Roman humiliation at its most refined. Every element of the display was calculated. The jewelry said, "Look at all the wealth she once controlled." The chain said, "We have transformed that wealth into her shackles." Her own riches, the trade routes, the treasure of the East, had been melted symbolically into the instrument of her degradation. She was not just a prisoner walking through Rome. She was a living argument, a walking proof of Roman supremacy over the East. Every step she took under that crushing weight was a demonstration visible to senators on elevated platforms, to foreign ambassadors calculating their own futures, to Roman citizens who needed to believe their empire was unstoppable. The crowd roared as she passed. Insults, pointing, laughter. The sound of a city consuming someone else's suffering as entertainment. And what moved through Zenobia's mind during those hours? She knew Roman patterns. She had studied Rome the way Rome had studied her. She knew what had happened to Vercingetorix of Gaul. She knew what had happened to Jugurtha of Numidia. She knew that for some who walked this route, the march was the last thing they would ever see. That somewhere ahead, near the Capitoline Hill, an entrance waited. A small stone doorway leading down into darkness, where the celebrating crowd's noise could not reach. She did not know which ending Aurelian had chosen for her. She walked anyway, because there was nothing else left to do. When the triumph ended and the crowd scattered back to their daily lives, the soldiers did not take Zenobia to the Tullianum. Aurelian had calculated differently. He gave her a villa outside Rome, near what we now call Tivoli. Gardens, servants, fine food. The surface appearance of comfort surrounds the permanent reality of surveillance. Ancient sources suggest she eventually married a Roman senator, that her daughters were absorbed into respectable Roman families. She did not return to Palmyra. She did not reclaim her throne. She did not mint coins with her face again. She became an ornament, a permanent exhibit displayed in Roman social life for years. Every banquet she attended, every garden she walked through, every conversation she had with Roman aristocrats communicated the same silent message to everyone watching. That woman once ruled from Egypt to Anatolia. Now she lives here because one Roman emperor decided she could. Her survival was not mercy. Mercy would have been a clean execution. This was a strategy refined to its coldest form. Aurelian got a living trophy he could display for decades rather than a corpse that would be forgotten by the next season. Zenobia had to exist every day inside the knowledge that her survival itself was the final proof of her defeat. Some would argue this was the worst thing Rome could have done to her. But not everyone let Rome write that ending. The cold, wet island of Britain, around 60 CE. Prasutagus of the Iceni had spent years trying to survive inside Rome's machinery. He accepted their backing, kept his local throne, played the role of a friendly client king with careful precision. When he died, he left a will splitting his kingdom equally between Emperor Nero and his two daughters. A desperate, calculated gamble. Give Rome its share. Hope Rome leaves the rest. Rome read the will and set it aside. The imperial procurator, Catus Decianus, arrived. A procurator was Rome's financial instrument in the provinces. His function was extraction. He examined the territory, assessed the assets, and proceeded as though the will had never existed. Everything was seized. The local nobility was stripped, beaten, and enslaved. Roman moneylenders who had extended loans to Iceni nobles suddenly demanded repayment in full, immediately, with force. When Prasutagus' widow, Boudicca, protested, Rome delivered its answer in the most deliberate public manner available. Tacitus recorded what followed. His father-in-law had served in Britain. He was not working from rumor. Roman officers bound Boudicca and flogged her in front of her own people, blow after blow, not as punishment for a crime, not after a trial, a queen of a tribe that had fought alongside Rome. Stripped of every dignity in front of the people who had looked to her as their ruler. Then they went after her daughters. Tacitus uses short words and moves past the details quickly, not from carelessness, from the difficulty of writing about what happened to two young, unmarried girls of royal blood. It was done publicly, deliberately, in a manner designed to ensure the tribe witnessed every moment. This was not soldiers losing control. This was policy, a calculated application of Roman power to a situation where Roman officials wanted absolute clarity about who held authority. Boudicca and her daughters had no legal personhood that Rome recognized. They were outside the circle. Their pain was a tool. Their public destruction was a lesson delivered to every watching Iceni. Resist. And this is what follows. The lesson produced the opposite of its intended effect. While the marks of the whip still healed on her back, Boudicca began moving, settlement to settlement, tribe to tribe. Her words were not the words of a monarch appealing for her legal rights. They were the words of a mother describing what Rome had done to her body and her daughters. Tribes that had been robbed, humiliated, and pushed to the edge of endurance listened. Warriors who had served in Roman auxiliary units and understood exactly how legions fought began gathering. The army that assembled was not a professional force. It was a nation carrying a collective wound. Their first target was Camulodunum, a Roman colony built on stolen Iceni land, anchored by a temple to the deified Emperor Claudius, a stone monument to Roman rule that local people were taxed to maintain. Boudicca's forces burned it completely. No quarter, no negotiation. Rome had demonstrated what mercy looked like. They returned that lesson precisely. Londinium followed. The governor, Suetonius Paulinus, made a cold military calculation. He could not hold the city with available forces. He evacuated what he could and withdrew to find better ground. Everyone left behind faced the fire. Archaeologists excavating beneath modern London can still find it, a distinct red layer in the earth. The burn line from Boudicca's destruction. The heat was so intense that it left a permanent mark in the ground 2,000 years later. A scar that survived everything built above it. Verulamium fell next. 3 Roman centers were destroyed. Tens of thousands dead, according to Tacitus. The queen, who had been flogged in front of her people, had turned Roman Britain into a series of graveyards. When Suetonius finally found terrain that favored Roman discipline, the armies met. Boudicca rode along her lines before the battle. Tacitus records what she said, not as a monarch defending a throne, as a woman and a mother. The whipping was the reason. Her daughters were the reason. She told her warriors she fought not as a queen reclaiming property, but as a person answering what had been done to her body and her children. "The Romans see us as slaves," she said. "Today, we show them we are not." Roman formation discipline proved decisive in the end. When Boudicca's lines broke, there was nowhere for her warriors to run. Their own wagons and families positioned behind them to watch the victory became the trap that completed the slaughter. Boudicca saw the defeat clearly, and she understood with equal clarity what Roman custom dictated for captured queens. The rope, the chains, the slow march through foreign streets, the crowds with their hungry eyes, the long road to Rome with an ending already written. She took poison. Tacitus records it without dramatic embellishment. She chose her own ending rather than let Rome choose it for her. Her daughters vanish from the historical record after the initial assault. No rescue, no account of what became of them, just silence. Which may be the most terrible line in the entire episode. 2 queens, 2 choices, 1 system. Zenobia walked Rome's streets in gold chains and survived in a gilded cage. Boudicca burned 3 cities and died by her own hand rather than wear any chains at all. Different women, different decisions. The same machine that had decided both of them were objects the moment they were no longer useful as allies. But some rulers received neither the villa nor the poison. Some were simply processed. Beneath the Capitoline Hill, carved directly into the rock near the political and religious center of Rome, stood a structure Roman writers called the Tullianum. From the outside, it was unremarkable. A simple stone building. You could walk past it without a second glance. Inside was a 2-chamber system. The upper room held important prisoners before judgment. It had a floor. On that floor was a hole. Through the hole, the lower chamber waited. The lower chamber had no door to the street, no window, no torch brackets, no drain. It was reached only through the opening above. To place someone inside you lowered them through the hole. To remove them, you did the same, usually after they were dead. Roman writers who mentioned the place at all used words like filth, cold, suffocating darkness. The stone walls are perpetually damp from the rock around them. The floor is uneven. The air was thick with what had accumulated from the bodies that came before. This was not a prison designed for long-term custody. It was designed for one specific function: quiet, efficient, completely invisible erasure. If the state needed someone gone, the Tullianum accomplished it without spectacle, without public drama, without the executed party becoming a martyr visible to the crowd. You simply went in through the hole and did not come back out. Vercingetorix of Gaul understood what this place was before he ever saw it. He had accomplished something almost no one else had managed against Rome. He had united the fractious Gallic tribes into a coordinated fighting force. He had forced Julius Caesar, one of the most capable military minds Rome ever produced, into a series of desperate engagements. He had pinned down Roman legions, stretched their supply lines, made Caesar fight for every piece of ground. His final stand came at Alesia in 52 BCE. Starvation broke what Roman arms could not. His army could no longer hold. He made the calculation that his death in battle might inspire continued resistance, while his surrender might save lives. He rode out to Caesar, laid his weapons at Caesar's feet, and waited. Caesar kept him alive, not from mercy, from planning. He already envisioned exactly what Vercingetorix was worth breathing. A grand triumph in Rome, with the most dangerous enemy of the Gallic campaigns on display. The man whose name had rallied a continent against Rome, walking in chains through Roman streets while Caesar rode in a chariot above. Vercingetorix waited 6 years. 6 years as a prisoner, not in brutal conditions, simply held, waiting, knowing his fate was not canceled, only delayed. While Caesar finished his wars, navigated Rome's civil conflicts, and consolidated his power, Vercingetorix sat in captivity, aged and growing thin, and had nothing to do but understand precisely what was being prepared for him. By 46 BCE, Caesar was ready to celebrate. The triumph was massive. Multiple victories are honored simultaneously. Crowds that had not seen anything like it in a generation flooded the city. The procession followed the ancient route: plunder, paintings, animals, then the prisoners. At the front walked Vercingetorix, thin now, worn down by 6 years of captivity, transformed from the mounted war leader who had terrified Roman commanders into something that looked like what Caesar needed him to look like. Rome leaned out of windows to see the man whose name they had heard in dispatches and Senate speeches, the rebel who had almost broken their general's campaign in Gaul. He walked through streets filled with cheering for the man who had destroyed his people's freedom. When the procession reached the point near the Capitoline Hill where the route divided, the prisoners were separated from the main procession. The crowd watched Caesar continue toward the Temple of Jupiter. Few paid attention to where the captives were taken. They had served their public function. What remained was administrative. Soldiers walked Vercingetorix to the Tullianum entrance, stone, iron fittings on a small doorway. Inside, the upper chamber. On the floor, the opening. He knew what it was. Every foreign leader brought to this place understood what it meant. Some begged. Some stayed silent. Some cursed their captors. None of them walked back out. The guards prepared the rope. Above on the streets, Caesar's triumph continued. Drums, cheering. The noise of a city consumes the news of its own greatness. Below, in the stale air under the hill, the rope went around Vercingetorix's throat. No final speech recorded, no last words that survived. One moment, a man who had made Rome tremble was standing on a stone. The next moment, the lower chamber had him, and the darkness was complete, and the sounds of celebration bleeding through the rock above were the last sounds he ever heard. The lower chamber of the Tullianum was not built for comfort. It was built for disappearance. Stone walls weeping moisture, air that had not moved in years, a floor fouled by what preceded him. No light, no ceremony, no witness, except the soldiers doing their work. The man who had united Gaul against Rome died strangled in the dark like refuse, while the city above him feasted. When it was finished, his body was hauled out and disposed of, the final administrative step in the process. From feared enemy to paraded symbol to corpse in a hole beneath a temple. All so one man could stand in a chariot wearing a laurel crown and say, "Look what happens to those who stand against Rome." Jugurtha of Numidia received the same room, only slower. He had been a genuine problem for Rome for years. He ruled part of North Africa and understood Roman corruption the way a craftsman understands his tools. When senators came, he paid them. When generals marched, he stalled, bribed, and ambushed. He dragged the Jugurthine War across years, exposing the rottenness at the center of Roman politics in ways that humiliated the Republic publicly. It took Rome finding a general who could not be bought to end it, Gaius Marius. Jugurtha was betrayed by an ally and handed over. Rome wanted a performance. In 104 BCE, Jugurtha was paraded in Marius's triumph. By then, captivity had already done its work. He was a wreck. The chains bit into skin that had lost its health. The pride that had sustained him through years of evasion and combat had been systematically ground down. After the march came the Tullianum. Soldiers stripped him, tore his clothing, ripped out his earrings with enough force that his ears bled. Ancient writers record what he said as he was lowered toward the opening. By Hercules, he reportedly cried out, "How cold is your bath?" The bitterness in that line crosses 2,000 years. He knew exactly what the hole was. He chose irony over begging. They did not strangle him quickly. They locked him in the darkness and withdrew. No food, no water, no light. The king who had commanded armies and humiliated the Roman Senate in front of the entire Mediterranean world spent his final days feeling the walls of a cave beneath a holy hill, clawing at stone in absolute blackness. He lasted several days. Above, people told stories about the clever African who had finally met his match. Below, his body decayed in silence. Vercingetorix, Jugurtha, Zenobia, Boudicca. From Gaul, from North Africa, from Britain, from Syria. Different centuries, different cultures, different wars, different endings, but locked into the same fundamental pattern the moment they lost. The law that protected Roman citizens looked the other way. The legal sophistication that Rome pointed to as evidence of its civilization had already pre-decided their status. They were outside the circle, which meant they were inventory, assets to be evaluated, displayed, used, discarded, or preserved as trophies, depending on the calculation of one Roman official on one particular day. Courage did not count. Intelligence did not count. Military genius did not count. The honorable conduct of Vercingetorix, riding out to surrender to spare his people, did not count. The years of brilliant resistance Jugurtha had mounted did not count. The fact that Zenobia had ruled effectively and built a functioning empire did not count. The legal arrangement Prasutagus had carefully constructed to protect his family did not count. The only thing that counted was the verdict the law had already issued before any of them were born. You are not Roman. Therefore, you are property. And property does not have a case to make. The Tullianum still exists. You can visit it. It sits in the center of modern Rome, surrounded by cafes, tourist shops, and the noise of a functioning city. A church was built over it centuries ago. You enter through the church, walk down into the stone, feel the dampness, study the rough walls. Most visitors spend a few minutes and move on. They read the plaques, they take photographs, they do not stand still long enough to let the room tell them what it is. Above their feet, beneath the stones they are standing on, men died of thirst in complete darkness while the city celebrated above them. That is not a historical detail. That is the room itself. The same stone, the same dimensions, the same dampness in the air. Rome sells you the Colosseum, the Forum, fountains at sunset, marble and grandeur, and the romance of antiquity. Underneath a church in the middle of that same city, the execution chamber waits. Both things are in Rome. You cannot have one without the other. The triumph was the public face of Roman dominance. The Tullianum was what happened after the crowd went home. One showed you the humiliation, the other completed it in silence. Together they formed a system so effective that foreign ambassadors watching a triumph needed no further explanation about what allying with Rome meant and what crossing Rome cost. That is how power actually works. Not just through armies, through stories, through carefully staged performances of what happens to those who resist. Through the gap between the language a system uses to describe itself and what that system actually does to the bodies of people it has decided do not fully count. Rome called it ius gentium, the law of nations, civilized, measured, universal. What it meant in practice was this: if you are outside our circle, we have already decided. There is no appeal. No court will hear you. There is only the question of how useful your suffering is to our story about ourselves. Zenobia walked miles of Roman street under the weight of gold chains forged from the wealth of her own empire. She survived, transferred into a villa in Tivoli, displayed at Roman banquets for years as a living proof of Aurelian's reach. She never commanded another army, never minted another coin, but she breathed. And perhaps some mornings in that garden in Tivoli, she remembered what she had built, what she had dared, what they could strip away, and what they could not touch. Boudicca stood in front of her shattered army, with the defeat spreading around her, and chose the one ending Rome could not script for her. No chains, no march, no crowd, her own decision. Her own hand. The daughters who had been assaulted and then forgotten by the record, their silence is its own testimony to what Rome preferred not to document. Vercingetorix waited 6 years for his ending and met it in darkness, while the city above cheered the man who had defeated him. He rode out to Caesar to spare his people and received a rope in a hole under a hill. His name survived. His bones did not. Jugurtha mocked his executioners with his last coherent words and then faded into the dark with no one watching. What Rome actually feared was not their armies. It was their stories. Every chain was a story. Every triumph was a story. Every execution in the Tullianum was a story. Stories told not to the people being destroyed, but to everyone watching. To the allied king calculating his options, to the general considering resistance. The province decided whether loyalty to Rome was preferable to what happened to those who chose otherwise. And for 2,000 years, it worked. The stories Rome wanted told were told. In official histories, in triumphal arches, in marble monuments, in the word civilization itself, applied to a system that strangled men in the dark beneath its temples. The stories Rome wanted buried stayed buried, until people like you decide to look at what is actually under the marble. These rulers were not meant to be remembered this way. Zenobia was meant to be a footnote, a display piece in a Roman social calendar. Jugurtha was meant to rot anonymously. Vercingetorix was meant to be Caesar's trophy and nothing more. Boudicca was meant to be an example, a cautionary tale about the cost of resistance. They are still here, not because Rome allowed it, because the truth has a way of surviving what tries to bury it. The red burn layer under London is still there. The Tullianum is still there. The records Tacitus felt compelled to write are still there. The story of what Rome actually was, underneath the marble, underneath the philosophy, underneath the carefully constructed story of civilization, is still there. And now it is here with you. Because some stories are too important to leave buried in the places power chose for them. If this story moved you, if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, hit the like button so this reaches someone who still thinks Rome was only marble and philosophy. And subscribe to the Crimson Archive, because every week we pull another story out of the silence history buried it in, and share this with someone who needs to see what is actually underneath the crown. Remember their names, not because history demands it, because they earned it.